Hello. I was just sitting here looking at one of our old combinations, and this might help someone out because we're going to do some old school performance here. This was a combination that we had, and it came with the car. And what it was a smog headed 302 old school engine, not a roller engine, and it didn't run too well. It ran fine on a stock level. On the performance side, it didn't run well at all. And it had a cam in it, a 480 lift cam, I think it was. And if I remember right, it was actually the Performer cam, non-roller. And we're going back a few years here, so bear with me. So the heads were the smog heads, and if I remember right, they were open chamber heads. My son seems to think that they were 68cc, but we're not sure about that. But still in all, it had smog heads, and it had a torquer intake. That's not the right intake on a low compression engine. Open plenum single plane intake. So I think it did have headers, and it had a 2 1/4 exhaust. My son changed the exhaust on that car thinking it might help it a little bit because it was actually kinked off in a few spots, and it picked up absolutely nothing. So that was a little disappointing. And also had a 600 carburetor on it at the time. So I'll give you the time that this went down the track, and it was a healthy, hang on to your seats fellas, 1630, which in reality I've seen cars go 17s with combinations with a smog motor in a stock vehicle. This was in a Fairmont that was full weight, and I think it was a 78 or 79, and it was the Fairmont with the teardrop window in it. So that'd give you an idea what kind of car it was. And my son decided to put some gear in the car. So he puts the gear in the car, and the car went from the healthy 1630 to a 14.0, if I remember right. And I think it had 4 10 gears that we put in it. And I think the gears that were in the car originally were factory 270, whatever it would be. But this just gives you guys a rough idea, and this is to help somebody, to help you understand where, if you make what changes to your vehicle, what you might expect out of it in the times world. So now we're down to 1390. So then my son said, "Dad, I think I can get the car right in the 12s." And I said, "What are you going to do? Change the heads?" Or he goes, "No, we changed the transmission." So this had a built transmission in the car that shifted very well. It would snap your head back. I mean, the car was very firm in the shift. So whoever did the trans and that did a nice job. because it was a very firm trans. But he had a chance to sell the transmission out of the car, and he sold the trans. And the reason he did that is because we had 2 other C4s that were built laying around, and we knew what was done to the transmission. So he decided to sell the one that came with the car that was supposedly fresh, which we believe firmly. Fluid was clean, and like I said, it shifted great. So needless to say, the transmission and the converter was the only other thing that we changed, and the car went $12.92 the next week. Now I had an 8-inch converter, and this might surprise you, the converter was a 4500 stall. So you might think, how is a car with a 4500 stall with a low compression engine, how's that going to even help? Well, the converter was one of these converters that I asked the guy if he could possibly do our converter where it would be pretty decent on motor and good on nitrous. So that was a hard thing for that converter guy to do, because I said we're going to put more power to this later on in the near future. It's going to get ported heads and some things like that. So anyway, that kind of gives you a scenario to what way we were headed with this car. So that might help somebody that has a older school engine that's not a roller engine, and you want it to be a little bit faster, and you think, well, I might as well just put a late model 302 in it, because these old motors just don't perform. Well, just think, if we'd have put ported heads on that, it probably would have picked up at least another half a second, maybe more. Because keep in mind now, we would have also picked up compression, because you're going from a head that's a 68cc combustion chamber. So if we put a pair of P heads on that, well, you would have picked up about a point or more of compression. You'd have to figure it out, guys. I'm just giving a rule of thumb again. Rule of thumb, fellas. So I just wanted to do this little video and try to help some older school guys out, because we're always doing the 10-second stuff, the 9-second stuff. Somebody might just want a car to run a little better, go to a car show and have it just have a little bit more oomph to it. And you think, well, what do I do? Do I put a cam in this vehicle? Do I put a set of gears in it? What gears should I put in it? What converter should I put in it? Now, getting back to the converter, I wanted to say, I started to get off my train of thought again with this. Back in my day, if you told somebody a 4500 stall, them converters back in my day did not lock up. For somebody to say a 4500 stall with a stock engine, when the engine only goes to about 5,000, you'd say that guy's going to have a big dog on his hands. The cars that did that stuff back in my day, the way the converters were designed, they just rev up and they would mosey on down the track. The RPMs would be up, and half the time the vehicles didn't go anywhere. But now, the way the converters are today, I wanted to also do a segment about this to help guys my age, because anybody's been out of racing for a while, and you told somebody my age to put a 4500 stall 8-inch converter in a street car that's everyday driven, 90% of these guys would say that's a big mistake. I told my son it was a mistake, but the only difference was I had something to do with the way the converter was designed, hoping that it would work the way that I had intended for it to work. That was on the converter guy that did the converter. I just told him what I wanted. He's the one that did the work to that converter, so I'm not taking credit for that. But it was as close as I could want it to be, basically. On the racing side, it could have been a little bit looser, but for a street car, everyday driving vehicle, I couldn't ask anything more out of that converter, how that thing worked. And you could hear that converter work and lock up with no gear in the vehicle. If you want to put on my son's channel, Adam Grover, with the 1980 Mustang, and that had no gear, had an open-in rear in it. We first took it to the track. You'll hear that converter, how it would buzz up and then lock in once the car was out. And then we put gear in the car, and you could hear the converter work different. It worked a little bit different. The more gear we put in it, the converter would lock in different when you put more gear in it. So keep that in mind. Gear selection makes a difference with a converter. A lot of guys will tell you that don't matter. Well, if you listen to that car with no gear in it and then listen to it with the gear in it, and everything else stays the same, the engine didn't put any more power to it, just that same setup, that's when you can learn things, fellas, by keeping something the same with the engine. And when you do a converter swap or something like that, you'll learn more, because if you change 2 or 3 things at one time, then you never really know if you've made the right choice on some things. And I've seen guys do that. They'll change the carburetor, the cam, or intake, and they'll change the converter, and now they don't even know if the converter helped them out or not. They'll say, well, I went a half a second faster. Well, maybe if you left the stock intake on there and just changed the converter, it might have went even faster yet. We never know these things. So always keep these scenarios in mind. Or vice versa, guys. I hope you understand where I'm coming from with that. My point is, I seen a guy, he changed the converter, he changed the intake, the carburetor, and the car went a little bit faster, and yet he put the worst carburetor on there that he had trouble with. Instead of keeping the carburetor that went the fastest on that setup, he put the worst carburetor on it when he took it back to the track. Now, why would you do that? And it still went faster. And he goes, well, that carburetor must be okay now. No, it wasn't okay. It's just that the converter helped it get over the bad spot that carburetor was showing before. These kind of things, guys, I see do all the time. So I try to help out by mistakes I see, and that's how you learn, fellas, by your mistakes, hopefully. But I don't want to make a long video here. I just hope this helps people out, and I hope you get the right scenario where I'm coming from with this. I have a lot of chicken scratch written down on paper here, guys. I was asking my son, and I was writing things down, and it's all over the place. So I hope I didn't miss something here and leave something out. I don't think I did, but in a nutshell, that was basically it. What we picked up, how much time the car picked up. Now keep in mind, this wasn't a race car. This was just a driving car that he drove to work, and he just wanted to make it quicker, like he always does. And we had the stuff laying around. Now, one thing I will say, we did change that intake, the twerker, because I didn't care for that twerker intake, but this will help somebody else make up their mind. We put the accelerator on there, and if I remember right, it picked up a little bit, but it actually surprised me. It lost a little bit of 60-foot. So did it lose it because it lost torque, or did it lose it because the car spun a little bit? I don't remember. But whatever it was such a little bit, it's not worth worrying about. So if you have a twerker intake and you have an accelerator, you want to try them both, that's good. But if you think, well, Terry just said that car went 12s with the accelerator intake, and you use that combination to go by, and you have the other intake on your engine already, try the other intake first. Don't run out and copycat somebody's combination. Try your own. Try whatever you have first. You might go faster than somebody like me. You might stumble across something better than me. Oh, and I think one thing we did leave out, now I forgot to ask my son, it may have had a 4-hole spacer. I'm not sure about that one. So, always be sure to try a spacer. Open spacer or a 4-hole spacer. Them things don't cost much money, and you can pick up sometimes a half a second, depending on the engine and the intake, and what I mean by the engine, compression and the cubic inches, and all that depends on what kind of signal you're getting, how tall the intake is, that all that stuff will matter. You might listen to a guy like me saying, well, we put a 4-hole on this intake and it didn't help. You'll think, well, Terry tried that already and it didn't work. But it might work for you. You might have the timing set different on your vehicle where it needs a little bit more sting down bottom. And you might have a cam in retarded where it needs a little bit more oomph down bottom. So a 4-hole spacer might help you, and it might not help the other combination, your friend or your guy that you know that has maybe the same combination. So these are all things you want to try, and I hope this all makes sense to you guys. I'm tired here, and I'm trying to always look after you guys, and whatever pops into this head, I try to put it out there. The things I tell you guys is I try to save money, not to cost you money. So I had a few guys before, I mentioned what intake I didn't like, and everybody was worried about, oh, I have that intake. Chances are they did have an intake because it's one of the better intakes that they brag up in the dyno test. I'm not even going to mention what it is because it doesn't matter. You're probably talking a tenth or two difference, and the tenth or two that we went faster with might not help you go faster. So I don't want to make people make mistakes. So hope that makes sense to you guys. But I'm losing my train of thought here, like I always do, and I'm long-winded. So I hope this video helps you out. And if there's any questions, if I can go into more detail about anything, just leave me a little comment down bottom there, guys. That's never a problem. As long as I can have it come up and I see it, I'll be sure to answer it for you. I do have to say there's been a lot of comments that have not come up on my channel and I haven't been notified. And I look back months ago and somebody's asked me something and I didn't answer it because of that reason. It's not because I don't want to. So remember that. Anybody that sees this video and you leave me a comment, if I don't answer you, that's the only reason it would be, is because I didn't see the comment. So with that, guys, I want to say thanks for watching, and God bless you. Take care, everybody.